Day 121, on the mark of a champion. The mark of a champion is the ability to win when things are not quite right, when you're not playing well and your emotions are not the right ones. At the time I'm writing these words, I'm struggling. Instead of following my usual routine of writing in the early morning when I'm the most productive, I spent the entire day catching up with other tasks that all popped up at the same time. Now it's 8 p.m., I find it hard to focus, and I'm only beginning to write my daily word count. And yet, I'm sitting here in front of my laptop and pushing myself to stick to my resolutions, and yes, I'll sit here until I get it done. Wouldn't it be better to take it easy and just start again tomorrow? If I were sick and barely able to work, then yes. However, in my case, even though I don't feel even half as creative and mentally prepared for work as in the morning, I'm going to persist because it's when you struggle and things aren't quite right that you can strengthen your self-discipline the most. I know that once I finish my work today, even if it takes me several hours of strenuous work in the late evening, when I'm usually asleep, I'll feel good, knowing that I've kept a promise I made to myself. If you're struggling while reading these words, please remember that the mark of a champion is to keep going, under all circumstances. Sometimes it will be hard, sometimes it will be easy, and since you can't control it, the best thing you can do is to keep going, regardless of what's happening. I promise you that after a long, hard day of struggling, you'll still be happier than you would be if you decided to take it easy and then had to deal with the guilt of not having done your best. Day 122, on making agreements with yourself. Agreements you make with yourself. When you make an agreement and you don't keep it, you undermine your own self-trust. I strive to value the agreements I make with myself as much as the ones I make with other people. The reason is simple, just like when you lose the trust of another person when you fail to keep your promise, so you lose your trust of yourself when you don't keep an agreement that you made with yourself. Without self-trust, it's impossible to have the self-discipline and self-confidence to achieve big goals and change your life. Your doubts will nag at you and you'll sabotage yourself because, deep down, you'll believe that you can't trust yourself anyway. Whenever you make commitments with yourself, honor them just like you honor the word you give to other people, if not more. If you frequently betray yourself, you'll make it harder and harder to rebuild trust with yourself, and soon, it will take many months of consistent wins before you get to regain self-trust. Your brain rewires itself according to your repeated actions, and if you teach it to expect that you go back on your word, it will get better at exactly that skill, backing out of your agreements. Day 123, on doing this or nothing. The important thing is that there should be a space of time, say 4 hours a day at the least, when a professional writer doesn't do anything but write. He doesn't have to write, and if he doesn't feel like it, he shouldn't try. He can look out the window or stand on his head or writhe on the floor. But he is not to do any other positive thing, not read, write letters, glance at magazines, or write checks. Either write or nothing. I find it works. 2 very simple rules: A, you don't have to write. B, you can't do anything else. The rest comes of itself. If you're struggling to get to work, give yourself 2 options. For the next several hours you can work or do nothing. Entertaining yourself with your smartphone, social media, internet, talking, listening to music or anything else that serves as a distraction isn't allowed. You can walk around the room, sit, look out of the window, or stare at the monitor. But you can't do anything more exciting than that. This technique gives you a license to goof off, but since you can't do anything remotely interesting, sooner or later you'll probably get to work. And that's the purpose of this trick. You aren't forcing yourself to work, and hence, there's no resistance that you need to overcome. If you spend an hour bored out of your mind, even the most despised task you need to do will be a relief. Day 124, on daily gratitude. The more you regularly experience gratitude, the more self-control you have in various areas of your life. Research suggests that daily gratitude boosts self-control. Researcher David DeSteno says that expressing gratitude for little everyday things, such as the kindness of a stranger, functions like a vaccine against impulsiveness. It enhances self-control and makes you more oriented toward the future. In addition to boosting your self-control, expressing thankfulness daily makes you a more positive person, and that in itself is a huge benefit that can affect your ability to stick to your goals when the going gets tough. Each morning or evening express gratitude for 5 small things. For example, I'm now sitting outdoors. One thing to be grateful for is our beautiful planet, enjoying sunny weather, and doing work I like. I'm grateful because I was able to spend a few hours climbing today, and because, after I finish my work for the day, I'll cook myself a tasty, healthy meal. Such simple things are what makes life great. Why not regularly express your gratitude for them and become happier, develop more mental resistance, reduce impulsiveness and gain more self-control? Day 125, on going away from work. Every now and then go away, have a little relaxation, for when you come back to your work your judgment will be sure. Go some distance away because then the work appears smaller and more of it can be taken in at a glance and a lack of harmony and proportion is more readily seen. A productive, self-disciplined person isn't afraid of taking a break and relaxing a little. They know that if they don't do it, they won't recharge and soon their greatly decreased creativity and problem-solving skills will ruin their resolve. I strongly suggest traveling, even if it's just a weekend trip, to get away from your work, forget about it for a while, gain a fresh perspective and return ready to solve the challenges. Often when you're struggling with the same problem for weeks or months on end, it's because you're too close to it and unable to see the forest for the trees. An act of what you might consider a lack of self-discipline, taking it easy and going on a trip, is ultimately a smart technique to ensure maximum productivity and persistence for the long haul. Day 126, on shedding light on the dark things. Much as we must keep returning to the gym and pushing weight against resistance in order to sustain or increase our physical strength, so we must persistently shed light on those aspects of ourselves that we prefer not to see in order to build our mental, emotional and spiritual capacity. Who likes to think about their flaws, let alone put them on full display? We hide our dark side, our mistakes, our failures, temptations we couldn't overcome, and so on. Instead, we focus on our strengths and proudly talk about our successes. While bombarding yourself with self-guilt or embarrassment isn't a particularly bright strategy for success, sometimes it's necessary to shed light on the dark side and pick a weakness to address or a temptation you finally need to face and overcome. Self-denial is ultimately a self-sabotaging strategy. By telling yourself that you don't have anything to worry about, you might feel better temporarily, but the flaws and weaknesses don't go away. You're missing out on the opportunity to overcome them. Right now, spend a few minutes thinking about your unpleasant traits, the ones that you always ignore, or worse, don't even admit that you have them. If you're good at accepting criticism from other people, ask your friends what they think your biggest flaws are, and work on fixing them. Week 19 Day 127, on cold exposure. Take cold showers first thing in the morning. As soon as you get up. Jump in the shower. Close your eyes and turn the temperature to cold. Not just cold. Not ice cold. Try we just piped this water in from Antarctica because the penguins won't swim in it cold. Do this for 30 days in a row. I call it cold shower therapy because it, quite literally, is therapy. Doing a 2-month challenge of only taking cold showers was one of my first deliberate endeavors to improve my self-control. Unlike other goals that I pursued for the specific benefits that they would give me, my cold shower challenge was primarily about testing myself. During those 2 months, I learned a great deal about how to overcome temptations and how my own mechanisms of self-control work, and when they cease to function. I strongly recommend taking up a similar challenge to push your limits and toughen up. Is an entire month or 2 necessary to benefit from this exercise? Not really. Even just a few cold showers can be valuable lessons that will strengthen your self-control. Willingly exposing yourself to such a torture is something very few people are capable of doing, so this in itself is a great accomplishment. If your health doesn't allow you to take cold showers, and as a side note, please note that you should always speak with your doctor before making any decisions of such a nature, try other ways of cold exposure. Underdress in cold weather, submerge the lower part of your body in a cold bath, or turn your thermostat down. Voluntarily exposing yourself to the discomfort you feel when you're cold, no matter if it's a cold shower or something less extreme, will still be an excellent way to improve your impulse control and become tougher. Day 128, on principles. Principles are fundamental truths that serve as the foundations for behavior that gets you what you want out of life. They can be applied again and again in similar situations to help you achieve your goals. Do you follow a set of principles in your life? If not, it's time to design them and adapt them as an inherent part of your decision-making process, to ensure that you make better choices. For example, I have 10 fundamental rules that guide my overall life and many more that I apply to different aspects of my life. Here are 3 examples of my general principles that are applicable to every endeavor. 1. I never give up on anything that's important to me. 2. Time is my most important asset. I always focus on achieving more in less time. 3. Growth happens outside one's comfort zone. Security leads to mediocrity. These rules ensure that I live my life according to my most important values and help me avoid making decisions that favor instant gratification. For example, following the first rule means that if I establish that something is important to me, I won't give up on it, no matter what. Embracing the second rule means that I resist the temptation to do things mindlessly and always seek a more effective way of doing something. Living by the third rule means that I face my fears and resist the urge to stay complacent. This way, I'm always growing and reduce the risk of becoming too comfortable. These are not just mere words, I consider them as important as promises made to somebody else, so I need to fulfill them. What rules do you want to embrace in your own life? Make a list of your own fundamental truths that will help you get what you want out of life and treat them as agreements that you can't break. Day 129, on everyday practice. I mistakenly only associated the word practice with art forms such as music, dance, or painting. I did not see dealing with a cranky child, an overburdened work schedule, or a tight monthly budget as actions that required applying the same principles as did learning music. You can view everyday annoyances in 2 ways, as frustrating experiences or as opportunities to practice your willpower. A stranger bumped into you and didn't apologize. Practice your self-control by wishing him or her a good day. Your child is misbehaving and you feel like being a parent is sometimes too much to handle. Consider it an exercise in manifesting mental toughness. You have so much work to do and then your car breaks down, an unexpected bill comes, and a friend needs your help. Don't wish there were more than 24 hours in a day. Accept it as a challenge in improving your productivity so that you can get everything done on time despite new difficulties thrown at you from every direction. If you take advantage of every problem and look at it as a means of self-improvement, you'll improve your self-discipline and mental resistance just by going about your day. Day 130, on working on laziness. If you are smart, but not lazy, work on laziness. To do everything, simply because you can, lowers effectiveness. Concentrate on the really important things that get amazing results. Do only the few things with greatest benefit. As contradictory as it sounds, some self-disciplined people need to work on laziness to get to the next level of personal growth. Just like it takes discipline to work on the hard things, it also takes discipline to resist the temptation to work on unnecessary things. For example, as a self-published author, there are countless ways for me to promote my books. I dabbled into different marketing methods, but in the end had to limit my focus to only the few things that offered the greatest benefit. Doing everything would have perhaps portrayed me as a more hardworking author, but it wouldn't increase my effectiveness, and most likely would only reduce it. Restlessness can be a good thing to inspire a person to take action, but if it leads to mindless work for the sake of work, you're wasting your potential and resources you could have spent on another area of life where increased effort would have led to noticeable improvements. Periodically assess tasks you perform most frequently and ask yourself if you're not only exerting willpower to keep working, but also showing restraint when it comes to performing tasks that add little or nothing to your life. Crossing off unnecessary tasks from your to-do list might feel good, but it's just another form of instant gratification that ultimately compromises your long-term objectives. Day 131, on building in Arkansas. It took Noah 20 years to build an ark. And people said he was being silly because the skies were beautiful. And of course, the whole time, he looked stupid, until it started raining. You can spend a long time building an ark while everybody else is out there enjoying the sun. Your efforts to improve will draw criticism or ridicule from people who don't care about self-improvement. It's possible you'll spend a long time doing things without a reward and start wondering whether your goal makes sense. Is it worth it to spend several years working so hard to get a degree, build a business, or move up the ladder in your company while others are partying and enjoying their lives on credit? During the process you might face doubts and even feel tempted to give up. However, 5 or 10 years from now, the ones who are wasting time will get the short end of the stick when they realize that they wasted their time on ultimately meaningless pleasures. Now they're in debt, worried about how to pay their bills, and doubting that they'll ever have a successful career, while you're enjoying the fruits of your labor. Whenever you're in doubt, remind yourself that you're building an ark and that rain will come. Maybe now you aren't enjoying yourself as much as others are, but in the grand scheme of things, it's better to be prepared and suffer a little now to prosper in the future than live in sweet denial and one day realize it's too late. Day 132, on being willing to be bad. To get good, it's helpful to be willing, or even enthusiastic, about being bad. An expert is a person who has made all of the most common mistakes in their field and learned from them. They embraced being bad so that they could get good. For example, in rock climbing I noticed that if I stick to routes that are within my abilities or only slightly above them, I improve less quickly than if I climb routes that are well beyond my current limits. Sometimes I make a fool out of myself because I can't even start the route. And sometimes I surprise myself when I climb 50%, or sometimes even 75% of the route before it defeats me. The great benefit in climbing such difficult routes is that I make many more mistakes than when I climb easier routes. This is good, because it reveals my weaknesses and gives me more opportunities to learn. If you only stick to routes with easy holds, you'll never learn how to properly climb when the holds are no bigger than your fingertip. If you only climb on routes with easy footholds, you'll never learn the proper footwork that a route with sparse, slippery footholds requires. It's tempting to climb routes within your abilities because they make you feel good and capable, but ultimately, it's nothing but instant gratification. It's the hard routes that will defeat you that teach you the most in the long run, even if you hate climbing them at the very moment you are doing so. If you only set easy challenges for yourself, the ones that will never make you look bad or show you your deficiencies, you'll hamper your progress or even bring it to a halt. Overcome the temptation to lower your bar. Come up with difficult challenges, the ones that make you doubt you'll succeed, and get to work. Get as bad as you can now, so that you can become as good as possible in the future. Day 133, on self-caring. Self-discipline is self-caring. If we feel ourselves valuable, then we will feel our time to be valuable, to organize it and protect it and make maximum use of it. The way you look at what self-discipline is can affect how self-disciplined you are. If you think of self-discipline as punishing yourself in return for some possible benefits in the future, how likely are you going to be eager to maintain it in your life? Instead, what if you embraced self-discipline as self-caring, a way of manifesting that your time is valuable to you and that you want to make the most of it? Now, instead of seeing every temptation as something pleasant that you must avoid for the possible future benefit, you'd look at it as a threat to your well-being. For example, upon adopting this outlook on life, you'd understand on a deeper level that watching TV for hours on end is not entertainment, it's killing your valuable time, and in the case of low-quality TV, killing your brain cells. And the other way around, things that you currently consider torturous, such as waking up early, eating vegetables, saving money, expanding your comfort zone, and so on, would all become manifestations of self-care. You'd understand on a deeper level that waking up early makes you more productive, and consequently, creates more time and energy for you, even if it isn't always fun. Week 20. Day 134, on staying congruent. Immediately prescribe some character and form of conduct to yourself, which you may keep both alone and in company. If there exists a hack for quickly embracing self-discipline as a part of your identity, it's clearly communicating to everyone around you how important this value is for you, and then taking actions that are congruent with that decision. The key is to maintain that behavior both when you are around other people and also when you're alone. We're not talking about faking it in public. The beautiful part is that when others associate you with a certain positive trait, you'll want to maintain it. Think of a child who's considered to be tough by other kids. The next time he or she scrapes his or her knee, will he or she cry or try to remain congruent with his or her public image and walk it off? Obviously, we're adults now, but the basic premise doesn't change. Humans need to stay congruent, particularly around other people. All of my friends know that I'm a bit of a freak when it comes to self-discipline. Okay, not a bit of a freak, I am a freak about that, and consequently, this form of conduct is pretty much forced on me. I don't want to be incongruent with myself, and I don't want other people to think that I'm saying one thing and doing another. For example, if there's a challenge in front of me and I know that my friend is thinking that I'm going to face it instead of quitting, I'll face it, obviously only after I ensure that it's relatively safe. Then, when I'm alone dealing with a self-imposed challenge, I'll be less likely to give up, too. After all, I don't want to lose the respect I have for myself, and most certainly don't want my friends to be disappointed in me upon learning that I'm a different person around them and a different person when I'm by myself. Day 135, on staying in love with your goals. Skipping around from one kind of pursuit to another, grit is about working on something you care about so much that you're willing to stay loyal to it. Not just falling in love, staying in love. It's easy to fall in love, but hard to stay in love, particularly when the waters get rough. It takes constant recommitment, sacrifice, and a willingness to deeply care for what you already have. In a sense, falling in love is like immediate gratification, giving you butterflies and all that jazz without any unpleasantries, while staying in love, although it's rewarding in the long run, is sometimes an act of sacrifice that requires a great deal of self-control. When you set your goals, do you tend to stick to them for the long haul, or do you let the temptation to change things decide for you? If you constantly jump from one thing to another, perhaps you don't care about your goals enough to stay loyal to them. Ask yourself if that's the case, and if so, how you can find new, stronger motivators, or if perhaps you should give up altogether. If it happens with every objective of yours, even when you deeply care about it, like it was for me when I was constantly launching one business after another, it's probably not a question of not caring enough, but about a failure to exert self-control when faced with the shiny object syndrome. The shiny object syndrome is the inability to maintain focus on one thing. Mistakenly believing that the grass is greener on the other side. Instead of investing all of your resources in just one thing, for example, a specific relationship, business, diet, etc., you constantly replace the thing you have now with something else, just because it's new and shiny. What you fail to realize, though, is that by constantly upgrading, you never get to build something that lasts, so you fail to achieve your long-term goals. The next time you find yourself researching a new diet, workout plan, business model, way to save money, technique to stay productive, and so on, remind yourself that unless your approach is clearly not working at all, and for that, you need to stick to it in the long term, all you're doing is falling under the spell of instant gratification that will endanger your long-term goal. Day 136, on the desire for happiness replacing the need for self-discipline. Pitching is what makes me happy. I've devoted my life to it. It determines what I eat, when I go to bed, what I do when I'm awake. It determines how I spend my life when I'm not pitching. If it means in the winter I eat cottage cheese instead of chocolate chip cookies in order to keep my weight down, then I eat cottage cheese. I might want those cookies, but I won't ever eat them. That might bother some people, but it doesn't bother me. I enjoy the cottage cheese. I enjoy it more than I would those cookies because I know it will help me do what makes me happy. Life isn't very heavy for me. I've made up my mind what I want to do. I'm happy when I pitch well, so I only do those things that help me be happy. If something makes you extremely happy, the desire to do it as much as you can will replace or at least greatly diminish the need for self-discipline. Obviously, the thing that you love must be good for you. Eating French fries may make you extremely happy, but devoting your life to them won't be a good idea. For example, in my case, one of the things that currently determines many of my choices and replaces the need for self-discipline is rock climbing. It's the number one reason why I perform hard bodyweight workouts, to be stronger, to climb better, why I maintain low weight, because it's easier to climb if you weigh less, why I constantly expand my comfort zone, because it improves my mental game when I'm climbing, and so on. The thing that makes you happy doesn't have to be a sport, but it does need to have a positive influence on you. If you already have such a big passion in your life, link it to your new resolutions. There's always a way to combine a positive change with an improved ability to engage in your passion. For example, eating better will make you more energetic, which will make you better at everything you're doing, including your passion, so tap into this resource and let your desire to engage in your passion render self-discipline unnecessary. Day 137, on waiting for 10 minutes. For a cooler, wiser brain, institute a mandatory 10-minute wait for any temptation. Telling yourself that you're going to get something in 10 minutes satisfies your craving for the next 10 minutes. After all, you are getting your reward. You just need to wait 10 minutes. A curious fact is that after 10 minutes, it's likely that you'll no longer remember the craving or it will have diminished to such a level that you'll be able to handle it. And if not, you can tell yourself yet again that you'll have it in 10 minutes and repeat the process until the urge is gone. If you find the urge overpowering, use a stopwatch and stare at it the entire 10 minutes before succumbing to the temptation. After 10 minutes, even if you still reward yourself, at least you'll have exercised your self-control muscle a little. Note that you can wait for 10 minutes for any temptation in both directions, either by waiting for 10 minutes before you give in to something, or by giving yourself 10 minutes to do something and then allowing yourself to stop. For example, if you're facing the challenge of unpleasant, but necessary and urgent work to do, tell yourself that you'll only do it for 10 minutes and then you can quit. More often than not, you'll continue. And if not, as with waiting for 10 minutes before giving in to a temptation, you'll still have exercised your willpower. Day 138, on nature boosting your focus. Nature, which is filled with intriguing stimuli, modestly grabs attention in a bottom-up fashion, allowing top-down directed attention abilities a chance to replenish. Unlike natural environments, urban environments are filled with stimulation that captures attention dramatically and additionally requires directed attention, example, to avoid being hit by a car, making them less restorative. Research suggests that spending time in nature regenerates your ability to concentrate. What's interesting is the finding that even viewing pictures of nature can be restorative. If you're struggling to concentrate on an important task and no amount of self-control helps, head out for a walk in a forest or any other non-urban environment. I take regular forest walks at least 3 times a week and consider it pretty much a necessary part of my weekly routine. When you spend your entire days in environments filled with stimulation, your ability to focus will be greatly diminished. Give your mind some time to rest and seek places where you can be by yourself, without blinking signs, crowds, cars, noise, and pollution. If you can't afford or don't have easy access to the wilderness, at least try to spend some time in quasi-natural environments like a city park or even just your own backyard. If even that is not possible, put on your headphones and turn on a video of natural scenery. Day 139, on tolerating an absence of novelty. The use of a distracting service does not, by itself, reduce your brain's ability to focus. It's instead the constant switching from low stimuli/high value activities to high stimuli/low value activities, at the slightest hint of boredom or cognitive challenge, that teaches your mind to never tolerate an absence of novelty. The ability to thrive in low stimuli environments, such as when working without distractions, is one of the most powerful demonstrations of self-control. Sadly, most people don't possess it, because they have developed a habit of constantly interrupting their focus with low-value, highly stimulating activities, such as browsing social media or shopping online. If you're unable to tolerate an absence of novelty, you'll be unable to focus on anything for long enough to see it through to the end. Therefore, it's key to develop the willpower to resist the temptation to entertain yourself when things get boring or too challenging for your mind. I suggest a simple practice. Follow the Pomodoro technique of time management, in which you work for 25 minutes and then give yourself 5 minutes to distract yourself with whatever you want. Once the 5 minutes are up, you have to get back to work, and after 25 minutes more of work, you can yet again let yourself enjoy high stimuli, low-value activities for 5 minutes. The Pomodoro technique works so well because it doesn't force people to exert incredible amounts of willpower. It's only 25 minutes of work, so even if you're usually interrupting work every 10 minutes, you'll only need to wait for 15 minutes more before you can indulge. After following this technique for several weeks or months, you should notice an improvement in the quality of your work. Soon, 25 minutes of highly focused work will no longer be a challenge for you, and you'll greatly strengthen your self-control. Day 140, on longing for paradise. The problem with longing for paradises is that it distracts us from our efforts to extract pleasure and meaning from the present. In the pursuit of success, it's easy to forget that we live in the present moment. The struggle is certainly less attractive than the ultimate reward you're after, but it doesn't mean that you should let the vision distract you from the present. There's a danger in romanticizing the outcome. When you compare this beautiful mental picture to the struggle you're going through now, you may become discouraged because of the painful contrast between what could be and what currently is. By all means, if it inspires you to work, from time to time indulge in the fantasy, but don't forget that the future lies ahead, and it's the present moment you should focus on to ensure that that future actually materializes. Obsessing about the final outcome means robbing yourself of the pleasure and meaning of the powerful, difficult process that you're going through right now. The next time you catch yourself dreaming about the future, refocus on the present moment. Notice the small but positive changes that have occurred, thanks to your struggle, look at your progress so far, and draw inspiration from your sacrifices and your resolve to keep going, despite all of the hardships. Week 21. Day 141, on punctuality. A person who cannot keep appointments on time, cannot keep scheduled commitments, or cannot stick to a schedule cannot be trusted in other ways either. Punctuality is another facet of a self-disciplined person, while tardiness is often a sign of a preference toward immediate gratification. A person who's late doesn't give themselves a margin to arrive on time, so they get the instant gratification of gaining a few minutes of time at the expense of straining their relationship or their chances of making a good first impression. Meanwhile, a person who arrives earlier might lose a couple of minutes, but in the long haul enjoys the reputation of being a punctual, trustworthy person. If you're often late, realize that being late to an appointment doesn't differ from breaking a promise. It's still an act that can cost you the trust of another person. In addition to that, it demonstrates that you lack organizational skills and self-discipline. Is this the message you want to display to the world? Is being late something that will help you realize your full potential or stand in your way? Set a new self-discipline challenge for yourself. Resolve to always be at least 5 minutes early for every appointment in the next 30 days. After a full month, it should become a new norm for you, and you should benefit from improved relationships, as well as newly gained self-respect for having developed the reputation of being a punctual person. Day 142, on keystone habits. Typically, people who exercise start eating better and becoming more productive at work. They smoke less and show more patience with colleagues and family. They use their credit cards less frequently and say they feel less stressed. Exercise is a keystone habit that triggers widespread change. A keystone habit is a habit that results in other positive changes in your life without directly focusing on them. For example, the decision to start exercising will affect your diet, productivity, patience, and overall well-being. Instead of focusing on several different habits, you can concentrate on making one change and, as if by magic, it will lead to other improvements that are introduced virtually without effort. If you want to get the best return on your efforts, Focus on establishing keystone habits first and only work on other routines when you already have established the keystone habits as habits. Some keystone habits include regular exercise, making your bed every morning, tracking what you eat, saving money, meditation, waking up earlier, expressing gratitude, regularly getting enough quality sleep, trying a new thing every day. Day 143, on falling in love with the idea of starting. What was the use of doing great things if I could have a better time telling her what I was going to do? There's an inherent danger in sharing with everybody what you're going to do. You might fall in love with the idea of starting something at the expense of actually doing it. Telling others about your plan can be addictive because it delivers a reward without you having done any meaningful work. You boast about what you're going to do, people are impressed, and you get a sense of accomplishment. For example, I used to talk about starting to travel more, but whenever I was faced with an opportunity to go on a trip, I was scared. It was easier and more pleasant to talk with my friends about all the exciting places I would go to. Today, while I still feel some resistance prior to going on a trip, particularly a more demanding adventure, such as visiting an exotic country, I almost never talk about my plans until I actually book the flights and the trip converts from being a wish into becoming a real-world action. Are there any goals of yours that you started working on a long time ago, but which in fact still remain in the realm of unmaterialized plans? An easy way to figure this out is to think of your recent conversations and find a topic that you frequently talk about, but never actually act upon. Day 144, on the work of a human being. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present: I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? Or, have I been made for this, to lie in the bedclothes and keep myself warm? But this is more pleasant. Dost thou exist then to take thy pleasure, and not at all for action or exertion? Marcus Aurelius argues that we haven't been made for embracing the comfort of a warm bed. Is sleeping in more pleasant than doing work? Obviously it is. Otherwise nobody would ever do it. Yet sleeping in is only more pleasant in the beginning or when you've earned it. Making your life revolve around comfort and laziness doesn't lead to happiness in the long term, it leads to depression. Taking action and exerting yourself rarely feels good at first, but upon completing valuable work, the pleasure of sleeping in can hardly match the pleasure of being productive. The most powerful proof of the fact that human beings cannot thrive if they don't act and exert themselves is the research on retirement. For example, according to a report published by the Institute of Economic Affairs in association with the Age Endeavor Fellowship, retirement increases your risk of clinical depression by 41% and the probability of having at least one diagnosed physical condition by 63%. What's more, the adverse effects increase as the number of years spent in retirement increases. Obviously, the effect of retirement depends on how the retired person approaches retirement. Sadly, when facing a new reality in which they no longer have to work, a lot of people stop being active and disengage from life, and that's what leads to the disturbing findings of the study. The ones who feel that their golden years are indeed golden are the ones who continue to be active, whether it's helping their families, volunteering, working part-time, or embracing new hobbies. Whenever you find yourself discouraged, remind yourself that while succumbing to laziness feels good at first, ultimately it will only worsen your situation and make you even less ready to face challenges. Embrace discipline, stay active, constantly grow, and you'll find both fulfillment and meaning in life. Day 145, on complicating the world for profit. To earn a fortune in the diet and exercise industries, there is a dictum: complicate to profit. Fitness companies make a fortune on persuading people that exercise or diet is complicated. The same situation applies to the investment world. The more complicated something appears to be, the more people will decide that it's better to hire an expert to help them than do it themselves. Consequently, many don't start at all because they're convinced that they'll fail without help, and help, whether it's for fitness or in the investment world, is expensive. This provides a legitimate excuse not to start. It also makes you more likely to fall victim to the claims that some product, designed by the world's top experts, of course, is a miracle solution. In reality, most things are simpler than you think. You don't need to attend expensive aerobics classes to become fit. There's no need to buy pricey home-delivered meals designed by some renowned doctor to lose weight. An investment advisor can often deliver worse results than if you were to educate yourself with free articles and invest on your own. Whenever you want to make a change in your life and find that everywhere you look, companies involved in the industry make it complicated, step aside and review the fundamentals. Somehow people were still fit before the advent of commercial gyms. They still managed to build successful businesses without internet gurus. It was still possible to eat healthily in a world where bookstores weren't filled to the brim with diet books. Don't use the fact that the industry makes things complicated as an excuse not to make a change. Educate yourself about the basics and draw your own conclusions. For you to make a change in your life, no expensive coach is necessary. Day 146, on decision avoidance. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and, as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and, one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. Not making a decision is also a decision, and usually the worst one. While you're torn between one choice and another, you're losing time you could have spent taking action, any action, and then figuring out whether it was the right choice or not. People often decide to not decide, or they put off their decisions because of a fear of missing out. Choosing one thing means not choosing another. However, not choosing either of them means losing both. It's also tempting to avoid making a decision because it creates an illusion that you still have the freedom to choose. And while it's true that you do retain this freedom, there's more freedom in commitment, as it frees you from inertia and gets you closer to determining where you want to go. If you're hesitant about whether you want to pursue a certain goal or not, figure out a low-investment way to get started. You can't get much additional insight by waiting for an excessive period of time, while you can gain an immense amount of knowledge by going ahead and testing the waters. Day 147, on walking by your mistakes. Far too often we let little things slide. But just turn on the news and listen as the anchors lament an auto part defect leading to deaths and multi-billion-dollar recalls, or a small leak in a gas pipeline causing an explosion that endangers wildlife. Recognizing when something is wrong, big or small, and holding people accountable can save industry's billions and citizens their lives. Sergeant Bowen instilled in me instantly that if you do walk by a mistake, then you just set a new, lower standard. When you make an unimportant mistake, there's a temptation to let it go and ignore it. After all, it isn't a big deal, so why bother? If your dishes aren't pristinely clean, it won't change much in the grand scheme of things, and most certainly won't hurt anybody. The problem is that walking by your mistakes sets a precedent of tolerating small errors. You're also missing out on a valuable exercise in self-control, making sure that all that you do is done with the utmost care. I'm the last person to say that from now on you need to make sure that everything that you do is flawless. I'm fully aware that it isn't feasible, and I'd be a hypocrite to say that my favorite tea mug is never entirely free of tea stains. However, whenever you can, try to exercise a little bit of self-control and correct a little thing that you consider unimportant. It can be a small tweak in your posture, making sure that you sit properly in front of the computer. It can be making an effort to speak more clearly and improve your articulation. It can be ensuring that your bed is made properly or slicing a loaf of bread with more precision. I often spend several minutes trying to fix a paragraph that I don't consider up to my standards. In the grand scheme of things, one single paragraph doesn't mean much. However, when the little things are repeated over and over again, it does have an effect on the final outcome and carries the risk of establishing a precedent, in this case, of my being lazy with my writing. Week 22. Day 148, on fear. Action cures fear. Many put off acting on their goals because they're afraid. Instead of facing the challenge head-on, they choose a more comfortable option, withdrawing until they gain the courage to take action. The sad truth is that courage never appears out of the blue, magically manifesting itself if you only wait long enough. Brave people aren't immune to fear, they also feel it, but decide to act in spite of it. And in this very act of refusal, fear goes away and they get to do incredible things. As a rock climber, fear is my regular companion. Fear makes you question whether you can climb a particular route, or when climbing, makes you back out from a challenge. While fear does serve an important purpose in situations like climbing, when there sometimes is a risk of injuring or killing yourself, it's often a wrong counselor. The key is to ask yourself one fundamental question. Is there a statistically significant chance of harming myself? In climbing, a potential fall is often safe, so any fear that makes you question your abilities is unfounded. If a fall is safe, you might as well try and fall, nothing bad will happen. However, sometimes the decision to continue climbing needs to be carefully calculated, especially when a potential fall can be dangerous. Then fear can actually save your life. However, in most everyday applications, fear is unfounded. There's almost no risk involved in chatting up that attractive stranger, launching a side business on a shoestring, applying for a new job, starting a diet, or implementing any other change of a similar nature. This means that unless you're engaging in any higher risk activity, you need to go past your fear. I know, it's not pleasant, it's paralyzing, it causes so much pressure that all you want to do is get away from it. However, if you want to strengthen your self-discipline and build mental toughness, there's no better exercise than to repeatedly face your fears. By regularly facing my fear of heights, I was able to largely cure myself of it. If I were continuously avoiding it, hoping that one day the fear would disappear by itself, I'd never have become a rock climber. Day 149, on the weak point in your armor. The individual can attain self-control in great things only through self-control in little things. He must study himself to discover what is the weak point in his armor, what is the element within him that ever keeps him from his fullest success. This is the characteristic upon which he should begin his exercise in self-control. Is it selfishness, vanity, cowardice, morbidness, temper, laziness, worry, mind-wandering, lack of purpose? Whatever form human weakness assumes in the masquerade of life he must discover. Inspect your armor and find its weakest point, the common thread that leads you into most temptations or poses the biggest barrier to achieving your goals. For example, in my case, one of my weakest points is patience. If I do something, I want to go all out and get results as quickly as possible. While it often serves as a strength, it's also a common reason why I fail to achieve some of my goals. I follow rigid routines and am sometimes so strict with myself that eventually I can no longer continue because I burn myself out. What follows is a full-blown cheat day, after following too strict of a diet, an inability to write, after writing too much for too long, or an injury, after exercising too hard. My inability to be patient with the process was also one of the reasons why I failed to build a profitable business for several years. Instead of accepting the fact that all businesses need the owner's undivided focus for a long period of time, I constantly launched one business after another, thinking each time that the new business model would surely provide a breakthrough. Having discovered my weak point, when setting new goals I now focus on sustainability. I try to accept the fact that it's better to take the longer path with fewer pitfalls than choose the quick route with a high chance of failure or delude myself by thinking that switching my strategy, for no reason, will lead to success. What are your own weak points? How do they affect your goals and what can you do to fix those weaknesses, to prevent them from continuing to affect your life in a negative way? Day 150, on indulgences charging you interest. It's this great paradox that only a few people understand, but ultra-performers have realized that procrastination and indulgence are like these creditors that charge us interest. They make us feel good now, it's easy in the short term, but it's what creates the more difficult life. Metaphors can serve as useful tools to better understand and embrace concepts that otherwise don't produce an emotional effect. If I tell you that putting things off and indulging yourself affect you negatively in the long term, perhaps you'll agree with me and stay away from them. Or perhaps you'll ignore me, because the statement in itself isn't emotionally charged and memorable. Instead, what if you embraced the metaphor that procrastination and indulgence are like your creditors? They extend you some credit today, but don't fool yourself, they will be back, asking you to give the money back along with interest. The more you overeat today, the more time you'll have to spend in the future in a caloric deficit. A cake today is so tasty and nice to have, but don't let it fool you, under the friendly face hides a ruthless banker. The more time you spend playing video games, the harder it will be in the future to give up the habit and become more productive. Indulging yourself feels good today, but there will be a price to pay for it. What are the interest rates your indulgences charge you? The next time you're about to succumb to a temptation, ask yourself if you want to place yourself in debt, in exchange for a fleeting moment of pleasure.